This, to me, sums it up. If you earn it, they tax it. If you spend it, they tax it. If you save it, they tax it. If you invest it, they tax it. If you build it, they tax it. If you sell it, they tax it. If you live in it, they tax it. If you drive it, they tax it. If you eat it, they tax it. If you give it away, they tax it. When you die, they tax it. What do they do with all the money? They waste it.
Welcome to the Market Moment. My name is Matt Walters, and I'm here with John Martfeld.
Hello.
And Lee Mackey.
Good morning.
Got a few good topics today, but before we get into that, remember you can join the growing Market Moment online community by hitting the subscribe button. That would be awesome. Give us a like, subscribe, comment. We appreciate all of that and appreciate you guys tuning in to either watch or listen, depending on how you're taking this in. So a few good topics today. First, we want to start with cash. Really exhilarating, fun topic,
I like it.
Right?
Exciting. Yeah, I like it. I like cash too.
But over the last few years with interest rates, with what the Fed has done with interest rates, right? They've interest rates went from basically 0 to over 5%, and there were vehicles out there that we've been now using over the last couple of years that you just didn't use for 10 or 15 years because they didn't make any sense. And those vehicles or instruments, are a couple examples: CDs, T-bills, money market accounts, high yield savings accounts, right? And so that's been pretty good. I think a lot of it really started to accelerate when we hit that 5%. Mm-hmm. For whatever reason, that's an attractive number for a lot of people. It's like, hey, I can get 5% without taking any risk. Right. That's pretty good. And I agree. Like, hey, if we can get 5% risk free, that is good, depending on the situation and depending on what the goals and objectives are. But now we find ourselves in this situation where the Fed has projected themselves and basically come out and said, it's time for a policy change. Rates are going to be coming down, moving forward, to what extent and at what rate, who knows, but they're going to be coming down. We've already seen the 10-year come down from its high, and rates start to decline. So if you're someone who has found yourself putting money into CDs and some of these vehicles, what does this look like for you moving forward? Right.
I think the party's over. Well, a couple of things on the interest rate. Go back when the interest rates were lower. It's all about, can the interest rate you're making on your money outperform inflation? Inflation was lower, so it was still kind of underperforming inflation, but they were both low, right? Then inflation bumps up, interest rate bump up to kind of curve inflation. But you still have a very small gap between inflation and what you're making on your money, so the power of your money. But people, the mindset of 5% makes people feel good because we haven't seen that in so long, to your point. So now rates are going to come back down, and I'm not sure inflation is going to come back down I don't know if it's going to, we've seen softening and it's all sounds good. But if we have a spike back in inflation, whatever, the power of your money goes down. But to your point on this little tiny window where you could get 5%, CD rates, if you look at banks right now, they're not offering 2-year CDs at 5%.
Right.
They're offering 6-month, 8-month. They're preparing that when those CDs come due, rates are going to be different. And this may be the last run. If you're in a CD at 5% or greater, if you're that lucky, it's when that expires, you're probably not going to be able to reset that. It's going to continually start to drip down.
And that's a great point, because this whole time over the last couple of years, we've been in this inverted yield curve. And so to get that rate, to get that 5.3, 5.5, whatever it was, you had to keep it short term, right? You couldn't go say, hey, let's lock this in for the next 3 to 5 years.
Right.
You had to keep it short term, which anytime you're investing in short term fixed income assets or, cash equivalents, you have reinvestment risk, right?
Sure.
You're having to turn that money. It's going to come due, and you're going to have to reinvest it in something different. And so a lot of times what we'll talk about with clients is, depending on what your long-term goals are, a CD might or might not make sense. A T-bill might or might not make sense, but it's probably not the long-term solution. It could be a good 1 or 2 year gap here while we have rates where they're at.
Right.
But it's not like we're going to be able to say, hey, let's put $500,000 in CDs and keep that strategy for the next 25, 30 years, because rates will likely come down and we're going to have to renew. And that's kind of where we find ourselves today and moving forward, that reinvestment risk.
Classic example, last week I had a client that informed me that, they had quite a bit of money. They had just within the week, rolled over to a 5% CD for a year.
Which is
And
actually
which-
pretty good.
Which is good.
Yeah.
But, my comment to her was at the end of that 12 months, I can't foresee the future. I don't have a crystal ball, but it's more likely than not that the rates will be markedly lower, in 12 months. And, rates are going to come down a lot quicker than they went
course.
up.
Yeah.
It seemed like it took them forever to kind of get up to that 5% mark.
Yeah, you talk about the CD rates.
Yeah, CD,
totally
money
agree.
market.
Yep.
I've always thought that this is kind of a Goldilocks period for banks because, deposit rates are going to come down pretty quick. Well, they've locked those loan rates in at 8, 10, 12%.
Exactly.
Those aren't going anywhere. So, one would think that it's a pretty good time from financials from a margin standpoint, but because rates are going to come down quick.
Exactly. Now, go back 3 years ago before rates, 2022 is when the rates went up 500 basis points. Before then, when you did a retirement plan for somebody and it said they needed 5% return on their money to make it through the rest of their life, which is a conservative number, right? That's great if you only need 5%. 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, we were able to find that, but you couldn't find that through fixed income. You had to have dividends. You had to have some type of allocation to the stock market in some way, or, to get that.
Well, it was the only way.
Yeah,
I mean,
basically the only way.
Yeah.
And now, we've been kind of, I don't know what to use the word, spoiled, but the last couple of years we've had this rates where you can actually go get that and fix stuff. But again, when that goes away, you're going to have to dip back in to get those types of return. And that's where I think people have gotten used to that 2-year play where they've been able to get the 5. It's going away. One thing we do fixed annuities, and I look at the fixed annuity rates every day. They update the rates. And I have been watching the last 2 weeks. I've started to see pretty consistent decline on a very fast pace. Every day something is going away or down. So the annuity companies that offer longer term, but you're kind of tied, you're not liquid, those are starting to come down with the anticipation of rates coming down. So even locking up a little bit longer term is going to get a little bit harder to get good rates right now.
And I think the whole point of this conversation is not to say we're not anti-CDs or T-bills. We made recommendations that clients take advantage of that when it was the right situation and it made sense. I think the reminder is, though, there is risk with any investment, right? A lot of people think about risk and they think market risk, losing principal.
Correct.
Right? But there are many, many different types of risk. There's inflation risk, reinvestment risk, market risk, systematic risk, right? In all different types of
Government policy risk, which we're going to talk about later.
Yeah. And so even with CDs and T-bills and cash equivalents, there is risk, and it's inflation risk and reinvestment risk. Right? And so the way I'll position it with clients is it's not about running from risk, because you're not going to run from risk. It's about knowing what risk you have with each different option that you have and determining what risk you're most comfortable with. And so for some people, they say, I would rather take, and I'm more comfortable taking inflation and reinvestment risk than I am market risk. That doesn't mean it's right or wrong.
Right.
You just need to understand what that is and know that there is still risk involved.
Sure.
Exactly.
With no matter what your allocation looks like.
Exactly.
And that's easy for people to lose sight in because it's again, market risk is what most people think of when they think of risk. So anything to tie about that?
No, I mean, it's, something that you were saying, John, it's interesting over the last year or so, kind of our floor has been that 4 or 5% level, and anything on top of that was kind of gravy. Well, that floor is going to begin.
And it would be
down.
different if the yield curve wasn't still inverted. If you could go get
long term,
right. If you thought inflation was going to continue coming down and stay lower, and rates were going to come down, and you could go lock in 5.5% for 5 years, that makes a little bit more sense than saying, hey, let's take it for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
Right. So anyways, and
and the 10 years already come down. The Fed hasn't moved yet, but the 10 years already moved well below 4%. And so it's, we're not having to wait on the Fed to start lowering Fed funds rate.
Right.
And that's a perfect example of markets move before things happen.
Yes.
Right? Whether it's the fixed income market, the CD market.
The market's anticipatory, but sometimes it's wrong, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Sometimes
Oh,
it can
be.
over one way or the other, and then that's when you have the bigger whipsaw days or weeks or months, which we are. This to me in my 25 years doing this business, this is the hardest. This has been the hardest year, 2 years to, in my opinion, the foggiest to know what's going to happen next. I know it's hard to know what's going to happen next regardless, but this time frame with the Fed's actions, and the Fed is, and we don't talk about it, but 2008, they took away the reserve requirement to the banks. And so the banks are operating completely different. We've had that M2 measure money supply thing that we've talked about a little bit on here that's hard to explain, but that has been wild, went way up, went way back down. Great Depression numbers, but we didn't have a Great Depression. Yeah. There's all kinds of weird things that are kind of still out there, and the inflation coming down and the Fed attacking it, and the Fed saying recently that they're satisfied with what they're going to do, and that's why they're going to lower rates, and that's what we heard just this week, which we know. That's been anticipated. Now it's the battle of, are they going to do 25 basis point, 50 basis point? Are they going to do it again in October? Are they going to do it again? Right. Now it's going to be this battle of how fast.
How fast do they go? And
yeah, exactly.
Do they do 50 or do they do 25?
Yeah, so now we got a new thing to talk about.
Here we go.
Yeah.
It'll be fun.
Stay tuned.
All right, so next topic. I'm going to try to stay cool on this one. But so we're going to talk about the proposed tax plan from Vice President Kamala Harris and her upcoming administration. Some of this was proposed or has been kind of tossed out there from Biden previously, so not all of it's brand new, but she's kind of tried to put some new energy and focus on what she would like to do and focus on from a tax perspective if she were to be elected. So some of the highlights, and then you guys can add to it, but I know one that we've had quite a few questions on from clients is the tax on unrealized capital gains. Help me out here.
Higher income tax rates, capital gains,
corporate tax rates
realized,
going up.
realized,
unrealized,
and unrealized.
Yeah.
That's a big part
Those
of
are the
it.
big ones.
But,
yeah.
And technically, everybody, all the focus is on Kamala, but this is in Biden's budget.
Right.
This is Biden's proposed 25 budget, which she has come out and said, I am in full support of.
Yeah.
So she's getting, her name is being assigned to it.
now, yeah.
So, we talked a little bit, I think last week, maybe in the podcast, but, the corporate tax rate going up, the capital gains, realized capital gains rate jumping significantly. And then the one that everybody is kind of talking about, like you said, John or Matt, was this tax on unrealized gains. Now, let's preface this. That portion of the tax bill would only apply to people who have a net worth of $100 million.
Yeah.
Okay. But what it's essentially saying is just that. If you have unrealized gains, meaning that you haven't sold anything, you take a business owner, you take a home, you take a stock portfolio, and let's say it goes from $1 million to $2 million. But you haven't sold anything, but on paper, you've increased $1 million. There will be a 25% tax on that $1 million unrealized gain.
Yeah, and this is how I understand it. So what's been proposed, and this is how crazy this is. The more you explain it,
the crazier it gets.
The less it makes sense.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
And so I encourage everybody to go actually try to understand it because it gets dumber, I promise. And so if you have unrealized gain in that situation, like you just laid out, $1 million gain, the way I understand it is you can defer that gain until death.
But
with interest.
With interest.
So let's say you're going to have, in that example, you're going to have a $250,000 tax bill that's just hanging out there. So if you're 35 years old, and that's you, 40 years old, you're going to have $250,000 that from that point on, for the next 50 years of your life, is going to grow with interest that is then due upon your death. Okay? Just try to make sense of that and see what that would look like.
Well, and also, how are they going to determine if that very same stock you have that gain in falls down?
Well,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's how ludicrous this
January
is.
2nd, the market goes down 40%, and that $250,000 tax bill now is in tax that you're paying on money or assets that you no longer have.
Do you know the number one? This is a book out there, How to Ruin an Economy and a Market in One Fell Swoop, and this is the plan. So I'm going to get political here a little bit, but I'm not trying to get political. This is the way I see it. if I'm going to vote for somebody, I don't care if they're left, right, middle, outer space. I don't care what they are. But the economy, the American economy is so awesome. Our capitalist way we do things is so great. And we did it for so many years without a tax. Taxes is my biggest thorn in my side is anytime we talk about taxes. Just give an example. Trump tax cuts in 2016 or 17 that went into effect in, I think, the year of 17 for 18. I know it gets kind of convoluted, the years, but the first tax run after that tax cut, and we went from 35% corporate tax rate to 21% corporate tax rate, and everybody said this was only going to help the rich. This was this was only to help his buddies and all that kind of stuff, right? What it did is it brought businesses back into America. It hired more people. It helped everybody. Every ship rose from lower class to middle class to upper class. And so it wasn't a rich thing. But the other side to that, which is amazing, the tax dollars brought in that year after he did that was higher than any of the 4 years prior to Trump taking office. This is the point. Capitalism works, and if you have less taxes, you create growth. Growth is then taxed at some point, and it works wonderful. When you start overtaxing, smart people look at California and New York. Are they gaining residents or losing residents? And why are they losing residents? Because they have stupid tax issues in those states, and corporations and individuals are tired of paying them. And you talk about that it's only supposed to be at 100 million, if they do this thing. Well, that's to start.
It's a slippery slope.
Oh my gosh. If they get that through, then what's to say it's going to be 50 million a year later? And when what's to say it's not going to be 25 million? Oh, we got to lower it down because we're not getting enough in here. And the 25 million people are too rich, so we got to go after them. This is such a slippery slope, and it's like,
to your point,
drives me crazy.
In economics, there's something called the Laffer curve, Laffer.
Art Laffer, I think.
Yeah. This was an interesting point. The Harris plan would also increase the top federal income tax rates so that the combined state, local, and federal tax rates would be on the wrong side of the Laffer curve in 36 states, along with Washington, D.C., and that is the point at which higher tax rates create so much economic distortion that they no longer bring in additional tax revenue.
Well, you know what this is?
I mean,
it's crazy.
We've gotten to the point. Back at the beginning, the founding of our country. I'm going to go back. We're going back here
to the Tea Party.
A few years. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is like Boston Tea Party kind of moment, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there was our country was founded on this ideal that we're not going to be taxed to death and controlled. And they got to the point they're like, the heck with it. And there was the Boston Tea Party, right? And so it's going to take people standing up and saying, we don't want to live in a country where the federal government taxes us into oblivion and, decentivizes growth and capitalism and, innovation. And we can't just sit back and just be like, this is okay. Things are just changing. Yeah. Like, no.
When there's so many things that would have that make a lot of this implausible.
Sure.
How do you, is everybody worth over 100 million going to be required to submit their brokerage statements? Their
you got to submit like a personal.
Or are you going to have to get
a
home appraisal every year? I mean, it's
business
crazy.
Valuation.
Yes.
And how many people you think that are right there around that are going to be doing everything they can
absolutely
to come in under that?
And the thing that, and again, this is not a political conversation, but when I hear who's the senator? I'm drawing a blank. The female senator from maybe Massachusetts.
Elizabeth Warren.
Yes.
Yeah.
She's so anti-wealthy.
Yes. Anti-capitalism.
That some would say anti-American.
I mean,
I think she. To be fair, I think she lives in a tent underneath an underpass, so
Probably.
she's very much against it.
But
which is a joke, obviously. She's filthy rich.
They want to define income as essentially an individual's annual change in net worth.
Yeah.
Your net worth went from $1 billion to $2 billion because Apple stock went crazy. So you've made more money.
They are putting their ignorance on display for the world because they're saying, this is how little I understand how a business operates.
How economy works.
And how an economy works and how, They literally don't understand the basics
Now-
of
Yeah.
economics.
And I don't want
finance.
to. I don't want to even say. I don't want to preface this comment with, now to their point, because that would mean I'm agreeing with them somewhat. But I think a lot of what is driving this is the disparity, is the gap that exists now between essentially C-suites and the rank and file employees. I mean, I guess I can get that, and not to the effect of doing radical things like this, but it's driving a lot of that.
But look anywhere else in the world and show me a country and a system that has a stronger middle class and
No,
a stronger and go back and look at our history, and look at other points in history and show me the discrepancy between the upper and lower class. And I would say, if you really crunch the numbers and look at it, like, we're in a really good spot in terms of the number of our citizens, Americans, that are participating in economic growth and prosperity.
No, if you go to a socialist country and you decide you want to open up a heating and air company or something, you can work your tail off and you're going to be capped at what you can earn. The United States, you can drop out of high school, you can open, and I know a client of mine that did this. Mm-hmm. They got their GED at some point, but no college. They have their heating and air. They started doing that when they were really, really young. They're making over $1 million a year right now doing that business. They're in their 50s. They're going to retire when they want to because of hard work. There was nobody stopping them. In America, nobody stops you if you put in the hard work. If you educate yourself, all this stuff about, we whine about how it's so unfair. And I here's what I think is completely unfair, are how we keep some of these communities in our country down. We push them down. And if you don't think that's political, look at all of the communities around the country where there are people that are marginalized and they don't have a chance to get out. And I think you could put so much resources to those areas and help people find the solutions to get out of the terrible stuff that they're in. And we don't do that, right? We continue to keep those people.
But the way you do that is not by handouts
Taxing
from
the
the
rich.
federal government.
Yeah, I
it's
agree.
by incentivizing businesses
Exactly.
and entrepreneurs to go make investments there. And
Exactly.
The
The
opportunity
opposite is happening because the policies are so bad that good companies, entrepreneurs can't make a living. So they have to pull out. I mean, look at you could go any of these communities and you can see big name companies that are closing their firms because they don't have police protection. They don't have, there's no, they can't make money in these certain areas. So the opportunities for people to rise up and be in places, it's a vicious cycle. I'm gonna read this real quick because I think this to me sums it up. If you earn it, they tax it. If you spend it, they tax it. If you save it, they tax it. If you invest it, they tax it. If you build it, they tax it. If you sell it, they tax it. If you live in it, they tax it. If you drive it, they tax it. If you eat it, they tax it. If you give it away, they tax it. When you die, they tax it. What do they do with all the money? They waste it. This is why we broke away and talked to your point about the Boston Tea Party. This is why it'll never work, because both of our sides of government, both left and right, sit up in Washington, D.C. in their ivory tower. They have lost complete sense of what the rest of America is like. They simply want to stay in the country club that they're in. It reminds me of Hunger Games, where they're in the Capitol, and they don't want to have anything to do with anybody else. They don't care. But this is true. Think about all the taxes we spend on everything we do. Hardworking Americans all across from the lower end to the higher end, so that Washington, D.C. can spend money on the dumbest of things. We can fund Ukraine endlessly, and we don't even know where the money's going. You look at our budget for our military. They can't find money that was budgeted for the military. They don't know where they spend it.
Yeah.
This is like actual news out. I mean, there's billions of dollars hundreds of billions of dollars that we don't know where it's at. I mean, this is what our government does. They tell us that they're going to do all these great things. We see all these wonderful rallies at the Democratic National Convention, the Republican National Convention. And what do they do with this stuff? They just want to get elected because it's a great place to be when you're elected.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, I've been off the rails.
Let's take a commercial break and let John to take a cold shower, and we'll be right back.
That's all I got.
It's really, really important, which is why we're talking about it.
It is.
And I think we need to, one, you need to vote. You need to educate yourself and vote. And two, have a voice, like go out and stand up, because our nation was not founded on pacifists that set aside and just went along with whatever a select few told them to do, right?
Yeah.
And if that was true then, and I hope and pray it's true now and well into the future. And unfortunately, we are getting to a point where the federal government is taking advantage of people not standing up and having and being as loud as they need to be.
And they're lying.
I don't.
They're lying
I don't.
to us.
I don't want our country to become this example of, pseudo socialism. I mean, it doesn't work.
No,
Right.
There's not a country in the world where socialism works.
I agree.
And I don't
Yep.
want my grandchildren to be paying for some crazy experiment
I know.
that went horribly wrong. I mean, socialism does not work.
Well, my frustration is that we've gotten so angry politically and so on that it's like if you're one side, you can't be friends with the other side and so on. It didn't always used to be like that, right? You could have differences, but you try to come together and work together. And it seems like we are so far from that
Yeah,
it doesn't
it's-
happen.
yeah.
But what I
Unfortunately, personality is trumping policy
yeah, well,
in a lot of cases.
Yeah, a lot of cases. People don't look into that. When I watched the Democratic convention, I saw Michelle Obama come up and say that she was told or taught at a young age, her parents told her that to not trust people with money, not like people with money because they're bad, they're all that stuff. And I just was listening to that, thinking to myself, I mean, maybe that is all true and funny, but if
No,
that's
it's
the
it's
case,
not.
then sell 6 of your mansions and give it to the poor.
Well,
No,
and
I'm like,
and
it
what's-
just drives me nuts.
what's
I mean,
people with money?
I don't
Like,
understand
what
that.
does that even mean?
I mean, I would agree if the biggest drug dealer in town, and that person was filthy rich off killing people
Right.
with drugs. Yeah, I understand that's not good. But if you're building a
No.
business and you're trying, let's bring it down to Northwest Arkansas. David Lee, he started it by himself in an office. He then hired one person, and it turned into 2 people. Now it's 21, or growing even more than that. When we're in this beautiful building here, and we're helping so many people in Northwest Arkansas, it's unbelievable. The message that he started is getting out to everybody, right? And it's working. It's helping so many people. And we donate to 5 different charities. And you guys were talking about yesterday how much money we're actually able to donate this year, which is unbelievable. So should we punish David because he built this? Is he evil for building this and giving all these people opportunities? That's the point.
Right.
This is a small level. There are bigger companies. Should we punish the Waltons? Like for founding Walmart? Is that evil? All the money and time they put into everything in the world. Some people do it right. Most people do it right. Most people live by a good code of ethics and morals. And we act like that if you make money, you are somehow, evil and terrible. And
I
anyway,
think. Anyways, we're going to leave it at that. And we're going to talk
On a
about,
lighter note,
We're going to talk.
let's switch to a lighter.
We're going to talk.
meanwhile, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? I mean,
Me and John are going to go out for drinks immediately following the podcast.
it is 9:10.
So
There's a reason. There's a reason why my mom loves listening to John Martfeld. I went and visited my parents this past weekend, and I walked in, and first thing she said was, and I quote, "Hey, I watched the last couple podcasts, and you say the word too much." That was the first thing she said. Thank you, Mom. And then she said, I love that John Martfeld. I just love listening to him talk.
You know what? She's pretty awesome.
Well,
Is she?
hopefully you hear our conviction, and we're
Yeah.
not trying to get into an argument
No.
but it's just this stuff matters. It's
It does.
important. It's important to us.
But at the end of the day, it's football season.
It's football.
That's
Let's
right.
talk college
Oh,
football.
thank goodness it's football season.
What a
Football-
transition.
Oh my word! It's we need it after that, guys.
So let's just start it with this. Okay?
Razorbacks start this week.
Razorbacks start this week. Over under 5 wins.
Over.
Well,
Have
I'm
you
on the spot.
Have you seen our schedule?
Yeah.
Okay.
Our schedule is so daunting, but I do think Petrino is a spark. I'm going to say right at 5 wins. Can I do that?
Such a John Martfeld.
Yeah.
Gosh. It's like the hedges of all hedges.
I know. The one guy who does fantasy
Like,
football.
you know
all of
what?
a sudden-
I'm gonna be after being such a pessimist in the last like 20 minutes. I'm gonna say over.
I'm going to say over.
Okay. I
Bold-
hope over. I'm hoping over.
And I'm stopping at 6. I'm not.
Yeah. I mean, brutal home SEC
It's so
schedule.
hard. It's such a
but-
tough schedule.
But
Such a tough
it's just a fun time of year.
We
I mean,
woke up
yeah.
Saturday. You had college football on.
there was already one upset.
Florida
Yeah.
State lost. I mean, it's like
I
this
know.
is a phenomenal start.
I
to
know,
The
I
year.
love it.
And let me tell you something. I tell you, the NIL and
Yeah.
it has completely changed the landscape of college sports. I
Yep.
mean,
Yep.
from tennis and volleyball and cross country to the big major sports of football, basketball, baseball. I mean, getting off of the football subject, this is completely offline. Did you see the reports that the Razorback basketball team spent between $8 and $9.5 million this year on basketball?
It's unreal.
we
It's
have-
unreal.
And we have like 9 players.
And we have like
I know
9 players on
I know,
scholarship.
it's unreal. That word gets out. So now we've built that. Creates
you know what
a
we should
machine
do?
That's
We
gonna
should
be,
tax them. Just tax them into oblivion.
But it has changed. I mean, it's changed the landscape. I mean,
has.
to the point where I bet you I couldn't tell you 10 players on the Razorbacks right now.
No,
Now,
I agree totally.
Give me a few weeks and I can.
No, I know
But
exactly.
they were interviewing some of the sportscasters here in Northwest Arkansas, and one of the comments was made. She was like, "I've got to go and learn who the players are."
Yeah.
because it's just there's so much turnover.
Man.
But it's a fun time of year. It brings everybody together.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Progressive liberals, Republicans, Democrats. If you're a Razorback fan, you're a Razorback fan.
that's exactly right.
But
And if you're out at the Razorback games this fall, be looking for the
Mach 110,
Mach 1 tent. We'll have a
Yeah.
big
Which is awesome, yeah.
big party tent out by the stadium. Have
Yeah.
a good time. So feel free to swing by and say hi if you're ever out there.
that's right. We get started on Thursday.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
down in Little Rock, there was a big debate on sports radio this morning coming into work on do we want to keep it in Little Rock or not, but we won't go
No.
down that road. But
Make
anyway,
all the Central Arkansas people mad, but no.
Yeah. Our campus is in Fayetteville.
Yeah.
that's correct.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Okay. Well, I think that was a good podcast, but I don't know.
Oh, I'm
We're
fired
gonna-
up now.
John's over there sweating.
I feel sorry for all the clients John's gonna meet with today.
I
'cause-
know they're going to get so many good information.
Well, yeah, and fun conversation for sure. A lot going on with the election coming up and what the Fed's about to do and college football.
10 weeks.
So
10 weeks from today
Is the election.
is election day.
God,
yep.
that's
get out, educate yourself.
It's
and
a sprint.
Vote.
Educate yourself and vote.
yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, as always, we appreciate you guys joining and listening in, and we will see you next week.